Hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, yeah, Stoops he's creaked big time. I don't see any way around it. The house deal even made it worse. Then he got terrible news today. His right-hand man's going to Louisville. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. And if you don't understand how Kentucky and Louisville are, it's kind of an Alabama, Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan type situation. You don't want your right-hand man going to Louisville. That is just, It's very Hatfield and McCoy up there on that issue. And this is on Kentucky Sports Radio, and who wrote this but our favorite Kentucky writer, Nick Roush. I swear, Nick is more popular in Tennessee than probably as much as he is in Kentucky. Everybody loves Nick.
I'm so popular. Everybody loves me so much at this.
And you'll find out why at the end of this video. It says, why Vince Morrow left Kentucky and what it means for Mark Stoops' future. And again, it talks about how he was his right-hand man for more than a decade, great recruiter, all that kind of stuff. And Kentucky's not an easy place to recruit. Now, there's a fellow by the name of Eddie Gran, who has sort of become the general manager there at Kentucky. And he and Morrow don't get along. And ever since he took over that role, there's been a lot of this. And it's become a problem for Morrow, who obviously was the right-hand man, and now he probably feels like Grant is. He doesn't have the influence over Stoops that he's used to having, and it's frustrated him. And here it talks about last year's 4-8 campaign. Mitch Barnhart called that a blip. Morrow's decision to leave Kentucky for Louisville, it says here, is the clearest sign of the program's state of disrepair and dysfunction. It feels a little bit like he's leaving a sinking ship. And look, it's really... Mark Stoops has been a good coach. He's won a lot at Kentucky. He's the winningest coach in Kentucky history. And he's been solid. Last year sucked, but for the most part, he always gets you to a bowl game. He's even had 2 10-win seasons. So this is me not ripping on Stoops as if he's not a good coach. He is. But you can see that things are getting more and more difficult. You know, he had the I wouldn't call it a blow up, but he had a lot of friction between he and Calipari when John was there as the head coach. And Calipari just came out and said it. Kentucky is a basketball school.
This is a basketball school. It's always been. Alabama is a football school. So is Georgia. I mean, they are.
Right.
This is our football team. I hope they win games and 10 games and go to bowls. At the end of the day, that makes my job easier, and it makes the job of all of us easier. But this is a basketball school.
I don't care what anybody says about their program. That's not my business. That's not my lane. But when you start talking about my program and others that we compete against, I don't do that. I stay in my lane. And, so that's in defense of my players, the defense of the work that we've done. And believe me, we want to continue to push. But don't demean or distract from the hard work and the dedication and the commitment that people have done to get to this point. And listen, we all know this program wasn't born on third base. So some may, but I could promise you this football team didn't wake up on third base.
Yeah. And he wanted him to stay in his lane.
Stay in your lane, bro.
And that's been kind of an issue for a while. Then he flirted with Texas A&M big time and almost took that job. And it's really, ever since then, the Kentucky fans are like, I don't know how fired up I am about you anymore, Stoops. And then he has this 4-8 year, and it kind of stinks. Now, he'd be owed a ton of money, so that's a huge issue. And especially right now with the House versus NCAA settlement that's been reached. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. So Kentucky's in a tough situation. They really can't afford to fire Mark Stoops, but he's under so much pressure up there, and it's really, I don't think it's his fault. I really don't.
It's not your fault. I know. It's not your fault.
They spend all their money on basketball and really not on football. So how can you blame Stoops? I mean, this year alone, in 2025, they brought in some big-time transfers and great commits. Now, this is a little bit tricky. it says they're ranked number 11 with 2 5-stars and a 4-star with a 98 average, which is the key thing you got to look at. Let's see, Tennessee did good. Tennessee did real well. Almost a 98 also with 5 commits, 1 5-star. But one thing you can't, really Kentucky's higher than this because it shows 4 commits, but it only shows 2 5-stars and a 4-star. That's because they got a guy coming in that's a 7-footer from Europe, and they don't have a ranking on him. So they would be way better than this. And then when you put in the transfers they brought in, which are big time, they're actually ranked 4th, and that's without the 7-footer being considered. So they're in the top 3, really. And that's pretty much where they like to stay. They're spending a fortune on players, probably somewhere between 12, 14 million bucks. And that's why the House NCAA settlement is going to get so interesting. Kentucky cares deeply about basketball. If you've watched them over the decades like I have, it's their number one. It's not even close. Football matters to them. They would like to see a winning season, and that's fine. But what they want in basketball is real simple. Final Fours and Natties. Sweet 16, they'll live with that. They'll give you a little pat on the head, but maybe you'll play better next year. They'll live with Sweet 16. Elite 8's okay. They'll give you a pass on Elite 8. But if you don't reach Sweet 16, they're mad. They're angry. Reaching the NCAA tournament, that's second nature. They don't even think twice about that. They expect that every year no matter what. But if you get beat in the first weekend, they're going to be on you big time. And that's where Calipari had so much trouble. He kept getting knocked out early in the NCAA tournament, which is, basketball is a tournament sport now. They care what you do in March. And Calipari was having a tough time getting his team going because he's a slow starter. He brings in all these 5-stars, and then he has a tough time getting them to mesh. Usually by the end of the year, they start getting much better, but a lot of times it's too late, and you wind up with a seed where you're like kind of struggling, and then you have to play a good team, or in their case, they even got knocked out by some little, Oakland got them? Anyway, there are very high expectations in Kentucky land, whereas football, not so much. But now that you've got this House versus NCAA settlement, you've got $20.5 million to work with, 75% of which is supposed to go to football. If you think that's going to happen at Kentucky, you're crazy. Mark Stoops is not going to get $15 million to use because that's going to have to go to basketball.
He ain't lying.
So now, instead of just being kind of up against it at Kentucky where you're really number 2 anyway, now you're going to be number 2 financially in a league where teams are going to have a 3-4 to 1 advantage over you. Whereas Tennessee will spend all 15, 16 million on football, so will Georgia, Alabama. Kentucky can't do that. Otherwise, they'll have a crappy basketball team. And understand, they're less concerned about competing in the SEC than they are nationally. And what I mean by that, the Big East, they don't have any of those problems. They got $20.5 million to use, and they don't have any football. So what do you think Villanova, UConn, who just came off 2 natties, is going to do with $15 million if Kentucky's stuck at 3 or 4? It's not going to be pretty. So that money's going to go to basketball. It just flat out is. Otherwise, they're going to have to do work around with NIL, which we don't know what's going to happen there. I think that's going to be lawsuit after lawsuit. I don't think Tennessee, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, all those teams are going to let their NIL collect. Look, this was all done in reverse. Because the NCAA fought this forever and they didn't want schools for pay for play, they let these collectives get built up. And now they're big-time multi-million-dollar companies. And they're rocking and rolling. They know how to get all this stuff done, collect the money, all that. Now they've created this monster. And that monster is not going back in the box. You can just forget that. So we're going to have a huge battle between this new Seeley guy, who's the College Sports Commission commissioner, battling over NIL. Deloitte's going to come in and tell Kentucky and Tennessee and everybody else, oh, you can't have all this NIL money. And they're going to say, blank you, yes, we will. And it's going to wind up in all kinds of lawsuits and everything else. But you're going to have a bunch of teams. Stoops is creaked. He is just creaked big time. He's not going to have the money. I mean, explain this. How can Kentucky be ranked 4th when you add the transfer portal, not including the 7-footer? But football-wise, they can't get hardly anybody. I mean, look where they're at coming into 2026. All right, yeah, USC. I tell you, how does USC have 28? See, they've gone ahead and spent a bunch of NIL before the House settlement to try to get that grandfathered in. So they went ahead and just loaded up. Well, let's see where Kentucky is. I already know what I'm going to have to do. They're outside the top 50, so I got to hit load more. Once you hit load more, you get to number 78, Kentucky. They only have 3 commits, folks. And that average is just a basic 3-star guy. And you're in the SEC. So that's pretty awful, honestly. So they're already way behind in 2026. They've lost their right-hand man, who's their best recruiter. And they're going into the season having lost a bunch of guys in the transfer portal. They replaced him with a bunch of 3-stars. And their quarterback is not anybody you've ever heard of. Zach Calzada.
Who?
Now, look, I'm sure he's a great guy. It's not me getting on him. It's just when you look at his ranking, as a transfer, he was ranked number 388 and 87, which is kind of a lowish 3-star, which is kind of a middle of the road, maybe almost below middle of the road 3-star, number 26 quarterback. Now, Kentucky should have gone out and got like a John Mateer. Look, there were a ton of 4-star guys in there in the winter portal that he could have got. He just didn't have the money. So he went to this Incarnate Word and picked up Calzada, who at one point played some in the SEC, but, maybe he turns out to be good. Maybe. But are you really going to put all your chips in that basket? And then behind him, you got Cutter Boley, who was a 4-star guy out of high school, out of Kentucky, actually. And he didn't play so well last year. He tried to play in the Louisville game, and it was just not good. So they're kind of up against it. And I do understand that Tennessee wound up having to get a guy that was kind of a middle-of-the-road, high 3-star in Joey Aguilar. But that was a very different situation. Our 5-star guy, Nico, creaks us, and creaks himself big time by leaving. And he winds up at UCLA, which was probably his 7th choice. He wanted to go to Oregon, Ohio State, places like that. And they were like, absolutely not. First of all, we're happy with our quarterback room. You don't go into the portal in the spring. That's stupid for a quarterback to do that because all the quarterbacks have been picked. That was done in the winter portal. So their choices were very limited. Plus, they didn't like the fact that they were sneaking around Tennessee's back and talking to other teams. Oregon called them out. Called Tennessee and said, hey, your quarterback's calling us trying to transfer, and he wants $4 million. Said, you ought to be aware of that, Josh. So, we had the big blow up with Nico and all of that, and he got butt hurt because it got leaked out that they were negotiating, which of course they were. His pop said they weren't negotiating. Of course they were. And then he got mad and left in a huff, and then wound up having to take a $1.5 million pay cut to go to UCLA with about half the talent surrounding him in the Big Ten, which is not going to be easy. And Tennessee wound up with Joey Aguilar. Again, this is a guy that might end up being good. He was good at Appalachian State. We don't know. Maybe he's a Hennon hooker. Maybe he's not. But our situation's very different. It wasn't over money. Heck, we tried to spend the money to get some quarterbacks, but they were already locked in. And see, there are some quarterbacks in college football, when they sign a contract, they actually mean it, which is weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Weird.
Yeah, normally you just sign a contract and you just ignore it. So Kentucky football, hopefully for Mark Stoops' sake, and I can't believe I actually feel sorry for a guy making $9 million a year. I don't really feel sorry for him, but the pressure he's going to be under is crazy, and he's up against it like you can't believe, especially moving forward with a total lack of money, which is all going to go to basketball. Can he get to 6-7 wins? He needs to get to at least 6. Go to a bowl game, and Kentucky will leave him alone. The fans will be okay with him. But if he goes 5-7, it's going to be difficult. And he is not the type of guy that takes grief well. He can't take it. He gets very angry. He's already got a temper like crazy. So it'll be very stressful for him. The best case scenario is for him to coach well and somehow get to 6 or 7 wins, and then everything will calm down. But if he struggles and goes 4-8 or 5-7, it's going to get really rough. And Kentucky might hope that he decides to retire and take some sort of a buyout because he just can't take the stress of the Kentucky fans wearing him out all the time, which they absolutely will. And look, here is the one positive. We got to play at Kentucky this year. Tennessee does. And with the quarterback situation being in flux at Tennessee, maybe this will be your chance to finally beat Tennessee.
Mark Stoops is 2-9 against this team, and to walk around this place before the game, I was disgusted. The smugness of those guys just walking around like, we're going to walk in here, we're going to kick your ass, and you can't do anything about it. And it made me sick. And you know what? They did it. They still did it. What the hell? Can we just beat this team? I know that Mark Stoops has done a lot of good things. This is his one really bad thing. The stupid stat about beating teams with a winning record and taking the next step and blah, blah. Just freaking beat Tennessee. Please, can we just stop losing to this stupid team with their stupid orange colors, and their stupid song, and their woo, get their woo on out of here.
Yeah, I know Nick wants to see that. But look, my money will always be on Tennessee against Kentucky because it's football. Now, basketball is a different story. Beating Kentucky at basketball is always a blessing, and I always enjoy it a lot, especially if you can beat them at Rupp Arena, which is the Death Star. If you can win a game up there, you've really done something. But Kentucky is a basketball school, and this house settlement is going to make it even more apparent, and it's going to make it even harder on anybody that coaches the football program because they're going to get the lion's share of the money, the basketball team, and the football is going to be Oliver Twist.
Please, sir, I want some more. More?
Yep, Stoops, you're Oliver. It's just the way it is. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Lets me know to continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, boom, 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 hit that button right there. Won't cost you a dime, help you get my videos. And right over here's a video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. We'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jack.
What's the matter with you?
I'll make it.
All right. Buddy, get the ball to Jimmy, top the key.